Hey everybody, welcome to my last video of 2025. Wow, it's been a good year. Done a lot of videos this year. I'm finishing off the year here with a NASCAR video. Today I had a lot of choices of which topic to pick for this auto racing type video that I'm making here. A lot of people in auto racing had birthdays on December the 29th, which is how I decided to pick who I chose to pick. There were 22 different people that I found on trading card database with birthdays in the auto racing field on December the 29th. The one I picked was Waddell Wilson. He was born in 1936 on this day, on December the 29th in Bakersville, North Carolina, near the Tennessee border, northeast of Asheville, in the northwest part of the state. He is a former NASCAR Winston Cup Series crew chief and engine builder. He was the winning crew chief for the Daytona 500 in 1980, 1983, which is the first NASCAR race I ever watched on TV. So his is one of the first names associated or connected with NASCAR racing that I ever heard. And 1984. He was crew chief or engine builder for Holman Moody, Harry Ranier, and Hendrick Motorsports. Drivers included Bobby Allison, Mario Andretti, Buddy Baker, Jeff Bodine, AJ Foyt, Junior Johnson, Fred Lorenzen, Cale Yarborough, and Ricky Rudd. Wilson grew up in Bakersville, North Carolina. After graduating from the Nashville Auto and Diesel College in Tennessee, he worked for Cummins Diesel in Miami, working on transport truck engines. He started driving jalopies, street stocks, and modifieds at the Hialeah, Palmetto, and Hollywood short tracks in Florida. I wouldn't be surprised if this is where he first met Bobby Allison, who was down there from Alabama with his brother Donnie, getting his start as a driver. I've especially heard stories about Bobby at Hialeah, Florida. A quote from Waddell Wilson is, "I won a few," Waddell said, "but before long I figured building engines really was my niche." Wilson began as an engine builder for Holman Moody in the early 1960s, and he worked for them into the 1970s. This was really the heyday for the company founded by John Holman and Ralph Moody, who was a former driver. Wilson became recognized after building the engine that Fireball Roberts used to win the 1963 Southern 500. Engines built by Wilson had 109 wins, earned 123 pole positions, and won 3 championships: David Pearson in 1968 and 1969 in car number 17, Benny Parsons in 1973 in car number 72. Parsons set the record for the first 200-mile-per-hour qualifying lap at Talladega, using an engine built by Wilson at the spring race in 1982. Wilson later took over as a crew chief. His first race as a crew chief was at Daytona in the summer of 1979. Buddy Baker qualified on the pole in an Oldsmobile, car number 28, for owner Harry Ranier, but fell out after just 57 laps with ignition trouble and finished 34th. The next year, however, his driver Baker won the 1980 Daytona 500 with an average speed of 177.602 miles an hour, which has stood for decades as the fastest Daytona 500 ever. Wilson and Baker would go on to win one more race, 10 top 5s, 12 top 10s, and 6 poles while running just a partial schedule, only 19 of 31 races. In fact, in his 14 years as a crew chief at NASCAR's highest level, Wilson's team only ran the full schedule 5 times. When Baker moved on to drive for Haas Ellington in car number 1 in 1981, Bobby Allison moved into the 28 car, prepared by Wilson. Allison had a great year, finishing second in points to Darrell Waltrip while earning 5 wins, 21 top 5s, 26 top 10s, and 2 poles, competing in all 31 races. But Allison moved on to the Dygaard team in car number 88 for 1982, so Wilson started the season with Benny Parsons driving. After half a season with no wins, Baker returned from Ellington's team, but he did no better than Parsons, and Joe Ruttman drove the season's last race at Riverside with no success. Going back to running only about half the races in 1983, the slump quickly came to an end. Cale Yarborough, nearing the end of his 20-plus year career, had cut back to only running a partial schedule after leaving Junior Johnson's number 11 team for MC Anderson's number 27 Buick a couple of years before. He joined the 28 team and Wilson for their first race together at Daytona in February. This race is memorable to me because it is the first NASCAR race I ever watched on TV, and second race of any kind. My first ever race was the Indianapolis 500 the year before, when Gordon Johncock beat Rick Mears in the closest finish ever. I was hooked for life. Even though I was still a month away from turning 8 years old, a couple of scenes still stand out in my mind from that '83 Daytona 500. One is of journeyman driver Bosco Lowe's car spinning off the track and ending up backwards on pit road. The other is hearing the absolute unbridled joy and excitement in Cale Yarborough's voice immediately upon winning the race. This was the first race ever where CBS had an in-car camera to show the view out the windshield of a car during the race. I'll never forget that excitement and Yarborough's arms waving inside the car, still moving around the track on the cool-down lap. Again, seeing those scenes, I was hooked for life. And then the post-race celebration in Victory Lane at Daytona, where Yarborough was joined by his crew chief Wilson. Great memories. 6 years later, the same Victory Lane would be the scene of another memorable Daytona 500 victory celebration, when Darrell Waltrip danced and spiked his helmet like Ickey Woods. He would be my favorite driver for the next 11 years until he retired after the 2000 season. But that first Daytona 500 experience of mine is the reason why I picked Waddell Wilson to be the subject of today's video. The Yarborough-Wilson combination repeated their win in the 1984 Daytona 500, although they switched from Pontiac to Chevrolet. Yarborough and Wilson worked together for Harry Ranier for 4 seasons. Between 1983 and 1986, Yarborough and Wilson won 9 races and only 60 starts, including 4 of 16 in 1983. Wilson prepared an engine for Hendrick Motorsports that Darrell Waltrip used in a practice session to set an unofficial track record of 207.517 miles per hour at Daytona that exceeded Bill Elliott's 205.114 mile per hour mark in qualifying for the 1985 Daytona 500 by nearly 2.5 miles an hour. Rick Hendrick named Wilson to be the new crew chief, for his new third Hendrick Motorsports team in 1987 with Darrell Waltrip as the driver. Though Wilson and Waltrip were personal friends, they didn't mesh well together as teammates, and after a dozen winless races, Hendrick replaced Wilson with Jeff Hammond. Wilson was named the team manager for the rest of the 1987 season. In 1988, Wilson became crew chief for Jeff Bodine's number 5 Levi Garrett Chevrolet, owned by Hendrick, which had won the Daytona 500 2 years before. In 1986, Wilson and Bodine won 1 race and 3 poles together that year, finishing 6th in points. Wilson was replaced as Bodine's crew chief by Richard Broom in 1989, and he spent that season strictly building engines for Hendrick. Wilson became Ricky Rudd's crew chief in 1990 after Hendrick reduced to a 2-car team. Rudd replaced Bodine in the number 5 car. When Waltrip left Hendrick to start his own team with Car 17 and Western Auto as a sponsor in 1991, Wilson stayed with Rudd, who took Waltrip's former Tide sponsorship to the 5 car. Wilson had his best season in 10 years that year, finishing 2nd in points behind Dale Earnhardt. In his 2 seasons with Rudd, Wilson won 2 races, 3 poles, and had 32 top 10s in 58 starts. 1991 would be Wilson's last year as a regular crew chief. Hendrick had Wilson be the crew chief for IndyCar driver Al Unser Jr.'s only NASCAR start at the 1993 Daytona 500. Unser finished 36th after crashing out in the number 46 Chevrolet, sponsored by Valvoline. Wilson had his last crew chief assignment in 1995, working 5 races with Ricky Craven at the beginning of the season on the number 41 Kodiak Chevrolet, owned by Larry Hendrick, with a best finish of 12th at Atlanta. Cale Yarborough, after working with Wilson, ended his driving career in his own car. After working for Jim Mattei at Mattei Motorsports in 1998, Wayne Burdett, who was purchasing Yarborough Motorsports, hired Wilson to be his team's general manager for the 1999 season, with driver Rick Mast. This was a Ford team, car number 98. Wilson retired from racing in 2000 and he became a consultant for Jericho Performance Products. This company supplied transmissions to the Winston Cup Series teams for many years. For years I'd heard that thing about Jericho transmissions all the time on the NASCAR races, and I'd never seen it even in print until today. I always assumed it was spelled like Jericho and the ancient city of Jericho, Jericho, but it's actually spelled Jerico. So, now I know. Wilson received the Golden Wrench Award from the North Carolina Stock Car Racing Hall of Fame in 2006, the same year that Waltrip was inducted. Wilson was selected to be one of 3 retired crew chiefs to vote for the inaugural class for the NASCAR Hall of Fame in 2009. And then Wilson was inducted himself in 2020. He was featured on the April 9th, 2003 episode of the Speed television channel's show Men Behind the Ranches. I remember watching that episode of that show. Wilson is married to Barbara Wilson. They have 2 sons and 1 daughter, and they all work in motorsports. In 1990, Wilson released a book on preparing race motors called Race Engine Preparation. Excuse me. Wilson celebrates his 89th birthday today. So a very happy birthday to Waddell Wilson. Boys, I just about made it through the whole video without croaking on these peanuts that I just ate before I started this thing, so maybe I shouldn't have done that. For my next video, I will begin working on a Stories in a Song video about the Bee Gees song, How Can You Mend a Broken Heart, on New Year's Day, which is going to be my first video of 2026. After that one is finished, I'll be doing another video about golf, because I've only done one so far, as I had done with auto racing before today. So, look forward to those videos in the near future. Alright, thanks for watching everybody, and hope you all have a great week, and we'll see you soon. Have a good night. Bye now.